After 13 days of laborious destruction and turmoil, what we see is the people of Hawaii have finally been graced by the presence of Joe Biden. Lahaina has finally been visited by the president himself. This is quite fascinating because in the process of doing so, Joe Biden, one, was heckled and harangued. No one was happy to see him except for a very small amount of people. There is a major infrastructure bill being passed right now to be sent to Hawaii to fund the restructuring of the actual place that was burned. And what we see is that there's actually money being issued to Ukraine that is going to be signed off with this bill as well. So, this is just like the multi-omnibus bill that got passed. This is just like the Inflation Reduction Act. It's never about the purpose that's actually being pushed. What we see is we're going to be sending more money to Ukraine than we actually would be sending to Hawaii, and that's just ridiculous. Hawaii is filled with American citizens, and we're not willing to sit there and take care of these people, but we're willing to siphon your tax dollars and devalue your dollar so we can go fund a proxy war on Russia's border. Absolutely insane. And in the process of all this, when they were talking about the dead, Joe Biden has been accused of falling asleep. I don't know if he actually did fall asleep. I'm going to cover this both from the left and the right angles on this, because realistically, both the left and the right are usually wrong about a lot of stuff, and they obfuscate certain pieces of information so they can curtail certain narratives, so that they can structure their own ends, and that's never what we want, because that's never reaching the true goal, which the true goal would be the truth. I don't even know if Joe Biden actually fell asleep, and to be honest, I can't even be mad if he did. He's an elderly man whose mind is no longer there. Anyone who has seen Joe Biden talk and has watched any of the clips of him speaking over the past 5 to 10 years, and if you haven't, go watch the progression of his speeches over the past 5 to 10 years. You'll find a compilation on YouTube or something, and you will see that this man has clearly lost more than a few steps. He's being puppeted around like a corpse on marionette strings for the purpose of the establishment to achieve their ends. The stewardship of the Biden administration has truly never been stronger. Let's go ahead and get into this. Here we have from the Post-Millennial. Did Biden fall asleep during the meetings with the Maui fire victims? I don't actually know if he fell asleep. Go ahead and make up your own mind about this. They're talking about the losses of what happened, and he could just have his head down and his eyes closed, and the fact is that he's old and his face kind of sags a little bit, so it looks like he may actually be sleeping because it's covering up his eyes just a little bit. I don't know. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm genuinely not sure if he fell asleep, but either way, as I said, due to the nature of his age and the fact that this is a sundowning old man at best, well, how angry could you be? And how surprised would you be? When it comes to Joe Biden, how much time do you actually think he spends awake? And of all that time that he spends awake, how much of it do you think he is perfectly lucid? Honestly, ask yourself that question. Let's move on.
Never met before. We are a community that relies on family, on ohana, whether by blood or by friendship. But like many others, my son's home burned down. My daughter's home burned down. My home burned down. My parents of 59 years home never met.
That's unbelievable. A man's son, his daughter, his home, and his parents' home all burned down. That's generations of people that lost all of the generational wealth they would have acquired because it's all been destroyed, and it's only going to be worse when people like BlackRock and Vanguard and these massive institutional investors that are actually buying up large portions of land who are now offering people who lost their homes within days of these people's houses being destroyed, they're offering them pennies on the dollar. It's absolutely sickening. What we see here from Libs of TikTok, Biden compared a small kitchen fire he once had in his home to thousands of Maui residents losing their entire homes, cars, and possessions. Joe Biden, once again, in the process of attempting to relate to people, just makes things absolutely so much worse. He comes off so much worse when he tries to relate to people because he always tells these lies. Let's go ahead and get into it.
I don't want to compare difficulties, but we have a little sense, Jill and I, what it's like to lose a home. Years ago, now
Dude.
15 years ago, I was in Washington doing Meet the Press. It was a sunny Sunday. And lightning struck at home on a little lake that's outside of our home, not a lake, a big pond, and hit a wire and came up underneath our home into the heating ducts, the air conditioning duct. To make a long story short, I almost lost my wife, my 67 Corvette, and my cat. But all kidding aside, I watched the firefighters, the way they responded. You know, there's an old expression. I grew up right across the street from a fire hall in Claymont, Delaware. And
Oh my gosh, I have not watched this clip yet because I wanted to keep this fresh. A lot of the stuff I see with Joe Biden, I just see it randomly pop up on the internet. That was so bad. He's like, I'm going to tell you a little story about how I can relate to your struggle. I had a small kitchen fire once. I almost lost my cat. Can you believe it? My Corvette was in the garage. If you've actually had any thought process and you think Joe Biden's separate garage with his 67 Corvette was anywhere close to the small kitchen fire that was put out in his house, I'm sorry, but you're simply just not thinking. This is unbelievable. The fact that these are the platitudes that he tries to do every single time, and he just comes up with these small little lies most times. And I don't even know if this is a lie, but he comes up with these little stories to try and relate to people. And in the process, he just sounds so out of touch because he has no idea how to not sound out of touch because he's been doing nothing but operating with the elite class for so long that he has no capacity to properly interact with anyone who is simply just a normal person. What we see from the Citizen Free Press as we move on to the next thing is the Democrats are blaming the Maui fire on climate change. Biden bought a 27-car motorcade to the island. So, as we've seen many examples from people like MSNBC talking about the fact that, well, climate change is really a threat, and that's actually what's causing things like these massive fires. Look at what caused the fires in Canada. Look at what could have caused these fires in California. Look at this awful fire that's ravaged Maui. Can you believe it? It must be things like climate change. And then they started using examples of the fact that we just had the hottest global temperature ever recorded. It's like, really? In the entire temperature history of the Earth, that was the hottest day that's ever been recorded. And it turns out that wasn't even the case. That was just the ground temperature. That wasn't even the air temperature. So they were wrong about that, and much like they always do, they obfuscated a certain piece of information so they could sell their narrative, as per usual. And as we see, this massive string of cars, consistently, endlessly, effectively, 27-car motorcade, and Joe Biden and the Democrats consistently want to talk about the threats and dangers of climate change. Meanwhile, they want you to go ahead and switch to an electric vehicle that they will give you a $5,000 tax credit for that $60,000 vehicle that will then effectively bump up the price of that $60,000 vehicle to roughly $65,000 because you will always be the person who eats the cost when it comes to the industries that are being regulated by the government because they will always pass on that cost to the consumer so that they can make their money back. That's simply how it works. This is why government regulation on industry is such a problem because it makes the prices for goods so much higher. Okay, moving on from that total segue, going to Benny Johnson, it says Maui residents gave Joe Biden a warm welcome in Hawaii today. Here comes after 13 days. Fuck you.
Wow, he's finally here. Wow, yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for nothing. Fuck you.
Let him kid then.
Fuck you. And right here, and fuck you, Joe Biden, fuck you.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. Not their reaction. Their reaction is perfectly understandable. What's unbelievable is the fact that it says it took 13 days. And that's 13 days of absolute pain for these people. They went from living in the height of luxury. You're living on the cusp of a volcano, a beautiful island, beautiful white beaches, blue water, wonderful people, beautiful trees, sunny, just adoring weather, stuff that you would die to experience on a daily basis, like these lucky people in Maui thankfully get to have all the time. And what happens? They go from living in the height of Western luxury to the peak of primal instinct, fleeing fires to the ocean to hopefully escape with their lives. And what happens? Joe Biden says, hold on, hold my beer. You're going to have to wait 13 days while I send $24 billion to Ukraine. Meanwhile, you're only going to get $6 billion. I hope you all enjoy having $700 credits. I hope that pays for the suffering. I hope that can sustain you. Let's go ahead and move on. We have Ed Krasenstein. And Ed is one of the defenders of Joe Biden and the Democrats so fervorously, him and his brother Brian. I disagree with them on a bunch, but nonetheless, they check my biases and they do so honestly. Or at least I believe they're honest. Who knows, maybe they're charlatans and they're actually just bamboozling me as well. So, Ed says, this morning many people are spreading a video of Joe Biden calling him Sleepy Joe because it appears as though many might be sleeping while visiting the wildfire survivors in Lahaina Maui County in Hawaii. This is false. When you actually watch a longer clip, you can see that he obviously wasn't sleeping. In fact, he had his head down as the speaker was talking about a massive amount of people who had lost their homes, family members, and lives. Multiple people sitting down around him were wiping tears from their eyes as he bowed his head in a brief few seconds. So it could have been Joe Biden simply just bowing his head in respect. And I'm going to go ahead and mute this, and I'll just fast forward it and drag it through. And here's the point where he puts his head down, and that's where it's cut by the people who are far more right-wing. What they'll do is they'll cut it right here and just have him looking down, and they'll use 30 seconds from this point on, and they'll cut it there, and they won't say, oh, look, Joe Biden did anything. Or they'll use the rest of this clip, and they'll start it from the point where it looked like he was drowsy. And what they'll say is, look, Joe Biden stirred awake in the middle of the speech of people talking about the fact that people were dying and they lost their homes. We don't actually know what happened. All I know is people wouldn't even be surprised if Joe Biden actually did fall asleep in this situation. Which that is something that I think people should think about. We do not need geriatric people who do not know how to string a sentence together with their fingers on the nuclear trigger. Just a thought. Let's go ahead and jump into these articles real quick. The New York Post elucidates that Biden faces brutal backlash for poor taste jokes while visiting Maui wildfires. Comic relief tour is what most people are referring it to. And yeah, understandable. I really get it, considering the fact that he's making all of these spurious correlations with the fact of, well, you know, I actually lost my kitchen once, don't you understand? I can relate to you people. I mean, yeah, I could afford to have an entire house rebuilt, and I could have it financed and structured, and I could have a bigger home built than the one that I would have lost. But I mean, you people, what I'm going to give you, I'm going to go ahead and give you $700. And we see Joe Biden sending $700 to Maui fire victims sparks backlash. Insulting. And yeah, it's fucking insulting the fact that we're sending American citizens $700 to go ahead and satiate themselves when they've suffered the worst wildfire in American history in the past 100 years. And what we're going to go ahead and do is send an extra $24 billion to Ukraine. That boils my piss, and I hate my tax dollars being stolen from me, because taxation is nothing more than me being extorted for my money from the government so they can go ahead and fund their endless wars. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and see what else we have. We're moving on, and we see many children, likely among the 850 people still missing in Maui wildfires, says the governor, as Joe Biden goes on his comedy tour. So, 850 people still missing in the wildfires, likely most of them being children. And what do we see about this? Well, the numbers are being obfuscated much like many things are, and we're not actually getting full information on this. I would assume that the estimated people missing is far higher, and the people that actually died, the numbers are far higher than we actually know currently. There was an entire neighborhood of children that got evacuated from their school, and they got bused home, and after they were bused home, within 2 hours of them being taken home, the entire neighborhood was in a blaze, every house was burned to a cinder, every child was fucking dead. And this is what happens when people don't react. And you see people like the chief executive in Maui talking about the fact of how we had to go ahead and protect the water, because apparently water is a sacred resource. And in Maui, water should be treated with respect, because water is something that needs to be valued, because apparently we just denigrate it. We don't treat water with equity. I will go ahead and pull up that clip in just a moment, but the thing is, I cannot get over this. This boils my piss so fucking much, because you're going to say that water is valuable, and water, because it's this essence of life, is something that should be protected. But realistically, we shouldn't go ahead and protect these children. We shouldn't protect these people and their homes and their property with water, even though the island is, I don't know, surrounded by it because it's a fucking island. It's unbelievable. So, Maui emergency chief resigns following criticism of wildfire response. You'll never believe what he resigned over. The head of the Maui Emergency Management Agency resigned from his post on Thursday in wake of a significant criticism wave for his agency's response to the Lahaina fire, which he has seen claim at least 111 people, the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century. Maui County officials said in a news release that the MEMA administrator Herman Andanya had resigned effective immediately due to health reasons. What were the health reasons, bro? Were you having stress? Were you having heart palpitations because you realized the weight on your shoulders of 111 dead and possibly 850 children gone? 1,000 people dead because you didn't react, because you didn't have the proper infrastructure in place? I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if that would count as a health reason. Maybe all the people that suffered burns can go ahead and get an excuse to get off of their job and get off everything that they need for, I don't know, maybe the excuse of health reasons. I doubt they'll get the pension that you got, though. The only pension they're getting is $700 from fucking Joe Biden. That's all I've got. I'm going to go ahead and jump in right now to go ahead and find that clip of that guy talking about how water is sacred. I'll meet you there in just a second. Thank you, Jeremy Kaufman, for being the person that I knew had this actual video archived effectively on Twitter. And what's so fascinating about it is this tweet that he posted went fucking viral. Elon picked it up, Jordan Peterson picked it up, so many people picked it up, and only on a website like Twitter is something like this possible. Like I said, I'll see you in a second. Let's go ahead and jump into this worthless piece of shit. So, meet Kaleo Manuel, the official who refused to release water in Maui, contributing up to 106 deaths. As we know, it's 111 with 850 more missing, large portions of that being children. Let's go ahead and see how many more people are actually dead once the smoke officially clears and the rubble is completely moved away, and we can realize the total toll of what was taken from these people. A Hawaiian Studies major, Kaleo prefers a traditional, holistic, one-water approach where water is revered and not used. Water requires true conversations about equity, he says. If anyone looks you dead in your eyes and starts talking about equity when you're talking about the suffering of people who have been blighted by Mother Nature, fuck them. They're not a serious person. You should not interact with them. Do not give any of their thoughts any weight. Do not actually go ahead and get in a serious conversation with this person, because if you try and intellectually engage with them, they will do nothing but play pigeon chess with you. What they will do is they will drag you down to their level, they will beat the shit out of you with experience, and then tell you that they won. That is simply how it works. Let's go ahead and jump into this absolute scum.
The commission is responsible, per our authorizing statute, to protect and manage all water resources in the state. One Water is like taking it and looking at it from a holistic system perspective. And that's not any different than how Hawaiians traditionally manage water. You know, in essence, we treated Native Hawaiians treated water as one of the earthly manifestations of a god and a kua kane. And so that reverence for a resource and that reciprocity in relationship was something that was really, really important to our worldview and well-being, right? And living in an island, isolated from other, civilizations.
I have to pause just so I can say this. I'm reminded of this Argentinian, I believe it's a tennis player, where his comment was, "If I say what I want, I'll be suspended 6 months." I'm really having to bite my tongue on this one.
And so I think where it shifted to today, or over time, is that we've become used to looking at water as like something which we use, and not necessarily something that we revere as that thing that gives us life, right? I mean, to me, it's a shift in value set. And
it's a shifting value set. You know what my shifting value set doesn't abide for? You to sidestep using water when we're talking about people's livelihoods at stake, when we're talking about the lives of people at stake. I don't give a fuck about how holy you think water is. I'm worried about the lives of children that apparently burn to a crisp.
If we can start to really look at how we as humans in an island can reconnect to that traditional value set. So really my motto is always like, let water connect us and not divide us. Like we can share it, but it requires true conversations about equity. We can share it, but it requires true conversations about equity.
This is As he says this, on top of the deaths of 111 people, he says this with a smile on his face. Only someone who has gone to university could say something so monumentally stupid. Only someone who has gone through the purpose of getting a degree in academia and going through the actual propaganda structure that is the factory model that is the university system could come out and say something this outright retarded. Simply put, that's all I've got for this. Do not trust people like this. This is what happens when people have been propagandized into being part of the activist class. They think they're better than you, and they will quite literally smile upon the graves of 111 people as they say, well, the resource we must value is the one that literally surrounds an entire island. Only a university student could be pushed to the point of thinking they were intelligent when saying something this goddamn stupid. That's all I've got for this. I got way more heated in this than I planned on, honestly. Thumbs up if you liked it, a thumbs down if you didn't. Go ahead and tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below and laugh at me for being angry about this. But this boils my piss to the extent that, honestly, as I said, if I say what I want, I'll be suspended 6 months. Tell me where I was wrong in the comment section down below. Stay lovely, stay great. Peace out.